Hey folks, this is Kalani. The class balance tuning has finally started on the patch 9.2 PTR, which means we have a few class changes to look at and some huge buffs and nerfs to really shake things up. Some of the higher performing specs will see some nerfs and some of the lower performing specs will see some buffs, so they might not be all too surprising, but the buffs in particular are pretty big. We also have some changes to tier sets. We know how tier sets are going to drop, and it looks like they're going to drop a lot more than usual, and then there are some extra smaller changes on the PTR that we're going to go over as well. Before we jump in, be sure to hit up that like button and subscribe so you never miss another video. Let's start with the class changes, including those big buffs and nerfs, because they're always very exciting. Restoration Druids are first on our list today, and oh boy, what a round of buffs. They're going to get an extra 10% aura increase for their healing done, so pretty much every spell in their arsenal will heal for 10% more. That should put some more pep in your step and all those wonderful heal over time effects. They're going to get a similar buff for damage too. All damage abilities increase by 10%, so whether it's a Wrath or a Sunfire, it's going to deal a bit more damage with these buffs in play. Life Bloom is going to get some more direct attention. The heal over time has been increased by 12%, and the Bloom heal has been increased by 20%, so Life Bloom is going to do a bit more work on top of the other buffs. Nourish healing has also been increased by 15%, the Overgrowth talent mana cost was reduced by 60%, the Inner Peace talent now has an additional effect. While channeling Tranquility, you take 20% reduced damage and are immune to knockback effects. That's going to be huge for the Resto Druids out there. Your raid-wide healing cooldown now also doubles as a personal defensive, and you won't ever get interrupted from a knockback. And the last change for Resto Druids is for the Germination talent, which also has an additional effect. Rejuvenation's duration will be increased by 2 seconds, giving the talent even more value. It looks like healers are one of the main focuses this week because Holy Priests will also see some huge buffs. In the same way that Druid healing was buffed up, all of a Holy Priest's healing abilities have been increased by 10%. They were a bit behind in terms of throughput in some cases, so that 10% should help them catch back up. All of their damaging abilities have also been buffed up by 15%, so when you throw out those quick smites or holy fires, you're going to be doing a bit more damage. On top of those buffs, Symbol of Hope has been changed quite a bit. The cooldown was reduced to 3 minutes, down from 5 minutes, and the channel time was reduced to 4 seconds, down from 5 seconds. It will regenerate less mana overall though. It's going to be 15% mana for everyone in range, down from 18%, but that's a very small nerf when compared to the massive value you're going to get from the 3-minute cooldown. That's also going to give your group or raid more access to the cooldown reduction portion of Symbol of Hope, so that's going to be very useful in raids going forward. Holy Word Chastise's damage was increased by 25%, that's a big buff. That Holy Word could start hitting pretty hard if these buffs continue. The Prayer Circle talent will now also reduce the mana cost of Prayer of Healing by 25%, so another buff to add to the list. The Guardian Angel talent now has an additional effect. When Guardian Spirit saves the target from death, it does not expire. That means you will continue to benefit from the increased healing portion of the ability, which is pretty huge. The Afterlife talent has also been given an additional effect. As a Spirit of Redemption, you may now cast Resurrection, which ends the Spirit of Redemption. Spirit of Redemption will also increase the range of heals by 50%, up from 30%, so a Holy Priest can now always work as wipe recovery in a raid or dungeon, providing they're one of the last people to die. And in a really weird turn of events, the dev team are also completely removing a talent, moving things around and giving Holy Priests a brand new talent. This usually doesn't happen during a patch unless a talent has been absolutely garbage forever, but here we are. The Binding Heal talent has been removed. The Cosmic Ripple talent has been moved to where Binding Heal previously was, and then in that open spot on the 3rd row, a new talent will be added. The new talent is called Binding Heals. 20% of heal or flash heal healing on other targets also heals you. So you kind of get a free beacon of light, but it only works on the priest. That's still not too bad, and it could mean you don't need to target yourself quite as much in every type of content, and it kind of just bakes in the Binding Heal effect without giving you a new spell. It's not all good news for every healer though, I'm afraid. There is one healer with a few nerfs this week. Paladins are going to be knocked down a peg or two in a variety of ways. First up, Ashen Hollow's healing has been reduced by 15% for all specializations. On top of that, Holy Paladins will see a 12% damage reduction to Ashen Hollow, Hammer of Wrath, Judgment, and Holy Shock, so almost their entire kit when it comes to dealing damage has been nerfed by a good chunk. With the damage increases for Resto Druids and Holy Priests and the damage nerfs for Paladins, it looks like the dev team wants to get the healers a bit closer to each other in terms of potential damage output. Now moving on, there have also been a handful of changes to tier sets and their bonuses in patch 9.2. For Blood Death Knights, their 4-set bonus was changed from parrying an attack causes your weapon to lash out, heart striking your attacker, to when you take damage, you have a chance equal to 100% of your parry chance to lash out, heart striking your attacker. So the main change there was moving away from a reliance on actually parrying something and just using your parry as a chance to trigger. That should mean that any damage can now trigger this set bonus instead of just damage that could be parried. For example, most magic damage can't be parried at all, so the set bonus would have been worthless against magic damage in general, but now any damage should trigger the set bonus, at least that's how I read it. Protection Paladins will actually see a change that is more or less the same. Their set bonus used to be blocking an attack has a 33% chance to cast Judgment at your attacker. That's now been changed to when you take damage, you have a chance equal to 100% of your block chance to cast Judgment at your attacker. So again, providing value in situations where blocks might not happen quite as often, so the set bonus should be more flexible and reliable when taking damage from any source. Arcane Mages will see a nerf to their 2-set bonus, increasing your magic damage dealt to enemies affected by a touch of the Magi by 10%, down from 18%. That's a pretty sizable nerf, almost half of the effectiveness of what it was before, which is going to be painful for the Arcane Mages out there. The Fire Mage 4-set will follow suit with another nasty nerf. While Combustion is active, you burn for 1% of your max health every second, down from 2%. That's nice, I guess, but here's the painful part. Your Fire Blast and Phoenix Flames recharge 50% faster, down from 100% faster. So the effectiveness of that set bonus was slashed exactly in half, which is going to give you less instant casts during Combustion, which is your main damage window. That's all the major class changes so far this week, but while we're on the topic of tier sets, we now know how tier sets are going to drop and where you can get them. The most important point here is actually going to be huge for all of the raiders out there. From the recent raid testing, it looks like the current plan for tier gear is to drop as bonus loot. That means that we will get the same number of pieces of gear from each boss as we have so far throughout Shadowlands, but then on top of that loot, the tier gear is going to drop as bonus loot. While testing mythic bosses earlier, it looked like they were dropping 4 pieces of gear as well as 4 pieces of tier set gear split amongst the raid. So for a mythic group of 20, that could mean you'll see up to 8 pieces of loot drop from a tier boss. That is absolutely insane, and with it being bonus loot, we're going to see so much more tier gear than we have in the past, so hopefully we'll be able to complete our sets relatively quickly and help our raid as a whole gear up together. That also means that if or when tier gear drops that nobody needs, it doesn't impact the rest of the loot for everyone else, or at least it's not going to impact it as much. It also gives tier bosses a better chance of dropping the offset pieces of gear like rings and trinkets, so it's a huge bonus to raid loot in general. With the bosses dropping 4 pieces for 20 players, it seems like for normal and heroic raiding, you should expect 1 piece of normal gear and 1 piece of tier gear to drop for every 5 players in your raid. So if you run with 30 players, you could see as many as 12 pieces of loot drop all at once from these tier bosses. We also now have a good idea of where each piece of tier gear will drop now that the raid bosses have actual loot tables on the PTR. There are 5 slots that tier gear occupies: head, shoulders, chest, hands, and legs. None of the earlier bosses drop any tier, it's only end wing bosses, Anduin, and then the 2 bosses before the jailer. That does mean that the jailer doesn't actually drop any tier gear, so you won't need to worry about killing him. Lehuvim, the principal architect, will drop the hands piece of the set. Halondrus, the Reclaimer, will drop the legs piece of the set. Anduin is going to drop the head piece of the set. The Lords of Dread will drop the shoulders piece of the set. And then Rygalon will drop the chest piece of the set. This means 2 important things. First, the set pieces are not spread through the entire raid. Everyone's legs come from the same boss, everyone's hands comes from the same boss, etc, etc. So you know exactly where to look for a specific piece of tier gear no matter what class you play. The The second important factor here is that only 3 out of those 5 bosses are available the first week the raid opens. You can only get up to Anduin in the first week, which means that both the Lords of Dread and Rygalon will not be available, so even if you get super duper lucky with the tier gear drops, the max you can get in that first week is 3 out of 5 pieces, which will not be enough to trigger your 4-set bonus. So no one will be able to secure their 4-set bonus going into that second raid week, which is also Mythic week. I doubt that will have any major impact on the race to world first, but it's an interesting point nonetheless. You may have noticed that these items are dropping as actual items as opposed to tokens that are shared amongst several different classes. So it looks like we're moving away from a token system, which has some pros and cons. The pro is that you don't have to do any extra work, you just get your item and you can equip it. That's about it. The cons are it's going to take longer for any class in your raid that is a little bit lonely. If you only have one warrior, for example, they're going to have to get their tier gear themselves, and if they don't, well, they're just going to have to keep waiting. But if you have 6 hunters and duplicate tier gear keeps dropping for them, well, you have 5 other hunters to trade it to, so that gear doesn't go to waste and everyone gears up faster in general. I know we only have 1 rogue in our current raid group, so poor Zyzel is probably going to be one of the last chaps to finish his tier set unless he gets super lucky. It looks like the tier gear is going to follow the same general rules of personal loot. If you have a piece of gear in the same slot of the same or higher item level, you should be able to trade the tier gear. You might need to have looted the actual tier gear specifically to be able to trade a duplicate. It's all going to depend on how the dev team decides to restrict the trading by the time this patch goes live. Remember that this is all still in PTR, so all of it is subject to change, but it's very exciting from what we've seen so far. Another raid reward that a lot of players get excited for are the new mounts, especially the Ahead of the Curve achievement mount that always comes from an end of expansion boss by killing the last boss in the raid on Heroic. It looks like the Jailer will be no exception here. A new item was data mined that follows the typical pattern for this kind of mount. The Carcinized Protoform is an item with the same name and icon as the mount that starts a quest. The quest will reward you with the Carcinized Zereth Steed, a new mount that looks kinda like the Mechagon spiders from Battle for Azeroth, except it's much shinier with some progenitor styling. It looks pretty cool, and these mechanical spiders can now fly in 9.2, which is gonna make it even better. This mount also closely resembles the new mount that drops from the Jailer on Mythic difficulty. The big difference is that instead of a spider mount, this one is more like a mini spaceship. The cockpit looks very similar though. It kind of reminds me of Mimiron's head, partially because it's a golden floaty spacey thing, but it also doesn't look like anything we've seen recently. Mimiron's head was super weird and unique when it first came out, and I feel like this Overseer has the same kind of unique feel to it. I don't know if it really screams Warcraft to me, but it's cool in its own right. It also has an absolutely amazing mount special, which I'm sure everyone is going to spam all day and night if they manage to get their hands on this mount. Now, if raiding isn't your thing, if you're more into dungeons and Mythic Plus and really pushing that rating, this patch might have even more goodies for you waiting in the wings. There is going to be a new achievement, Shadowlands Keystone Hero Season 3. While you might immediately think of the Keystone Hero achievements for completing a plus 20 key or above, this is actually a new meta achievement. To earn this achievement, you'll need to earn a Mythic Plus rating of 3000, so a big step above the current requirements for Keystone Master. A rating of 3000 is about what you would get for completing all dungeons, including the 2 wings of Tazavesh on both Tyrannical and Fortified, as plus 20 keys. So it looks like the dev team is going to reward the players who push themselves the most in this next season. A new big rating achievement could have an absolutely amazing reward tied to it, but it's not currently in the PTR files. So keep your eyes peeled for an update on this achievement to see what that reward is going to be. But what do you think an appropriate reward would be for 3000 rating in Mythic Plus? A new mount, a shinier mount, some titles, unique gear sets, or maybe unique weapon transmogs? What do you think? What would be fitting for this new achievement? Now, as a quick note on Mythic Plus, the new seasonal Mythic Plus affix is now testable on the PTR, so expect to see a video going over exactly how that works in the very near future. And then to very quickly wrap up the end of this video, there's a nice quality of life change that was just enabled on the PTR in the new Zereth Mortis zone. This Forge of Bonds has been here for a while, but it hasn't been active at all until now. So with this Forge fired up, you won't have to go back to your Covenant Sanctum to learn new conduits or change things around. That's going to be fantastic for anyone who plans to spend a lot of time in the new zone, so almost everyone, I guess, and it's going to give you the option of tinkering around with conduit changes whilst questing and doing your general daily chores in Zereth Mortis without having to go trekking all the way back to Bastion or Maldraxxus or wherever your sanctum happens to be. It's a small change overall, but an incredibly welcome one. And that's the news roundup for this week. It's exciting to see some heavier class changes and balance tuning start to happen. That's the sign that we're really getting somewhat close to a final PTR build, and then on to a release date. What do you think of the nerfs and buffs this week? Are there any classes you're hoping will see some significant balance tuning? How do you feel about tier sets dropping as bonus loot and potentially dropping a lot more than what we're used to? Leave all your thoughts in the comments section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and to everyone who subscribed on Twitch. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another video. Thanks for watching, folks. Good luck and have fun, and as always, I will see you next time.